Tommy with Elevation Every Weekend. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a few years since I've made one of these comprehensive top 10 fat bike videos, but over the last few years there's been enough new bikes released that I feel like it's worthy of making a new video for 2025. Some of these bikes I actually own, others I've been able to test and ride extensively, and then the rest are bikes that I find intriguing or based on my experience feel like they look great on paper. The front half of the video is going to be focused more on the newer bikes, those recently redesigned, and then I'll move on to other bikes that have been around a while, are tried and true performers, and still worth considering. Otherwise, these bikes are not ranked in any particular order. I'll cover some bikes that are on the higher end of the spectrum and really focused on performance, but I'll have plenty of bikes that are also more budget friendly and just great all-around bikes. After my main list, I will do some honorable mentions at the end and even include a couple e-fat bikes that I like. I will also mention, especially if you're looking for maybe an older bike on the used market, all of my prior top 10 videos that I've done are still a great resource, especially if you're looking at a bike that's maybe 5 years or more older, because you can still get a really good or even great performing bike on the used market on a budget. I will link all of these videos in my description down below. I will also link any other video I reference in this video in the description. So the description will be a great resource for fat bike related information if you want to dive deep on any aspect. So on to the bikes. Let's start off the video with a bike that has so far eluded me, and it comes from a really mainstream popular bike company, and that is Trek with the Farley. Trek actually did redesign the Farley last year, and while it wasn't a radical redesign, the Farley was already a very good and capable bike, so they just brought some good minor updates to the mix. They tweaked the geometry slightly to be a little bit more modern, at least by current fat bike standards. Another nice upgrade is they went from a press fit bottom bracket to a threaded bottom bracket, something I wish they'd do on some of their mountain bikes. But probably the coolest thing they did is offer a bunch of new mounts to facilitate their custom racks and accessories. As seen here in what Trek calls the Winter Edition, Trek offers a range of products from racks to bags to even fenders that seamlessly integrate with their Farley models, and this is one of the coolest things I think they've done with their new Farley. While I think any variant of the Trek Farley is a good option, the one I really like for this list is actually the highest end version, which is the fully carbon Farley. It's definitely the best choice at the more performance side of things, and Trek does have that lifetime frame warranty, which is always good insurance. So this carbon frame, higher spec build bike keeps the weight under 30 pounds, and that's running 27.5 by 4.5 inch tires, and the price point isn't too crazy at about $3,700. Next up on my list is the Ari Bikes Kings Peak, formerly known as Fazari. This Utah-based direct-to-consumer bike company not only rebranded last year, but they also brought us a couple new fat bikes. The Kings Peak is a great looking bike all around and is built around 27.5 by 4.5 inch tires. The lower price comp build spec has everything you need and nothing you don't, and it's coming in at about $2,300 now while on sale, which is quite reasonable considering it's a full carbon frame and a respectable mid-tier build spec. The Kings Peak has a stated 19 mounting points for gear and accessories, so it's definitely built with adventure in mind. And if you have a higher budget and want a little more performance, they have the elite build spec at about $3,000. The Kings Peak has been tested and proven itself in the harshest winter bike packing conditions, so it can definitely perform in that context or just as a great day rider. Next up on the list is the ATO Voytech. ATO is the bike brand born from the engineers of Wolf Tooth Components, and with the Voytech they've had what I've always thought was a great looking bike, and it's been on my previous lists. It was always a full carbon higher end option that had a really good performance and feature set and typically had a lot of fun color combinations. And while all of these attributes have remained, they have actually completely redesigned the Voytech, now called the Voytech 2.0, and in doing so they've offered one of the most intriguing design elements I've seen on any fat bike, making for what might be the most versatile bike on the market. So the big feature with the Voytech 2.0 is the adjustable geometry of the bike based on their patented tuning chip dropout system and their brand new Geo chip, which allows the front geometry to be altered as well. These two adjustable elements allow the wheelbase, the reach, and the head tube angle to be adjusted to desired ride characteristics, which is really nice if you're going to run this bike year-round in backcountry snow in the winter, and maybe with a smaller tire and front suspension in the summer. The Voytech has always promoted a narrow Q factor, which is essentially the distance between your pedals, and on some fat bikes can be somewhat wide. So while I've never found that to be an issue for me, if you are someone that's sensitive to the wider Q factor of some fat bikes and you end up with knee or hip pain, the Voytech is one to look at for you. ATO has managed to build this bike with only a few slight compromises to tire size, which is limited to 26 by 4.6 inch tires, but can still run 27.5 by 4.5, and of course 29 plus. And even though the higher priced carbon Voytech 2 is the bike that makes this list, they actually do offer a more affordable steel frame version, and that same bike can also be had in titanium, which is called the Arctidus. Next on this list is the Corvus ATO 2.0, formerly known as Fatback Bikes. The company rebranded to Corvus a few years back, and they continue to offer one of the most comprehensive lines of fat bikes on the market. They also had an all-new bike drop in late 2024. The ATO 2.0 is definitely more on the premium side of the spectrum, with full bikes starting at about $4,000, but it does not disappoint with a number of tweaks to the frame design attributes, geometry, all while still offering the largest possible tire clearance. And it also happens to be one of the most unique looking frames on the market today, for better or worse. And if you happen to be a fat bike rider who actually happens to prioritize dirt descending rowdiness over pure backcountry snow performance, the Skookum AF is a nice alternative option from Corvus. So definitely check them out. So now as we shift to more of the older tried and true options, next up is of course Surly. There are a number of companies that offer fat bikes in 2 distinct models, but Surly is one of the few that has 3 distinct options, not including an e-bike. They are the Wednesday, the ice cream truck, and the recently released Moonlander. While I do really like and have extensive experience on the Wednesday, and I think the new Moonlander is fascinating and a real stretch for fat biking, the ice cream truck is the bike that's on this list. I have owned the ICT since 2020, and if you've watched my channel at all, you've seen that I've done literally everything here in Colorado on that bike. It's proven to me to be the most capable and reliable fat bike I've ever ridden. And I like it so much, I just got another ICT frame to do a custom build on, so stay tuned for that. The ice cream truck is reasonably priced, highly capable, and versatile, and most importantly, fun. It is a classic and quintessential fat bike, and I have dozens of videos with it on this channel if you want to dive deep on it. Ultimately, the Surly formula for fat biking dates back to the beginning of the sport and is still successful today. Next up on the list is another OG fat biking brand, and that is Borealis. Last year I had about 6 months to spend with the Borealis Keystone, courtesy of Borealis, and that's their full carbon higher performance frame option. And as much as I loved it, it's actually not the bike I ended up buying from Borealis, and that goes to the Flume. The Flume is their more mainstream, budget-friendly alloy frame option, but don't let that fool you. It's actually not that far behind the Keystone in actual performance, and it can be had at a significantly lower cost. And it does have the option to run a rear rack, which is also good. I bought the Flume to be my do-it-all fat bike, highly capable, good performing, and it's the bike I intend to travel with. I've said this in prior videos, but I'll still say it again. I consider the Flume to be the best performance value fat bike on the market today, and one I can actually recommend from personal experience. And I still think the Borealis website is the benchmark for what a bike website should be, as it lets you as the customer go through and pick literally every aspect of the bike, and you can tailor it if you have a hard budget you have to maintain, or you're looking for that ideal combination of higher performance parts or a weight target. Next on the list is another tried and true adventure and fat bike oriented company, and that is Salsa. Salsa offers 2 fat bikes, the Heyday, which was formerly known as the Muckluck, and the Bear Grease. The Heyday is actually the bike on this list that I would recommend for most people. Despite me being a longtime Bear Grease owner and really liking that bike, I wouldn't recommend it for this list, and I'll circle back to this bike and my reasons why in the honorable mentions section. The Heyday facilitates almost the full range of fat bike tire sizes. It is a budget-friendly aluminum frame for about $1,700 and a complete bike setup, and they offer the Heyday in a higher performance carbon frame option for about $3,000 full bike setup. Like most Salsa bikes, there's a wide range of frame mounting options for bike packing and adventure. The Heyday is a good option for those who don't want a steel frame bike or a much higher cost carbon bike, but something that falls in between on the cost to performance value ratio. Next on the list is another OG brand, and that is 907, and they are still putting out some really great bikes. They were one of the front runners in the industry, putting out max tire size bikes, but still with performance in mind. And they are also well proven, doing big adventures in the winter terrain of Alaska, where they're based. While their carbon lynx frames are in the higher cost spectrum, they do offer a more budget-friendly aluminum frame Tundra with similar design attributes at a much more affordable price point. So if you want a bike from a company that's been doing it a long time and has a high pedigree in their fat bike products and is something a little different from the norm, check out 907. As we're getting to the end of the list, next up is the RSD Mayor. I included this bike on the list because it's one of the more versatile options on the market. It has a significantly more aggressive frame geometry, which while still offering adequate performance in the snow, makes the bike especially capable of summer dirt and trail riding, especially if you want to run 29 plus and a front suspension fork. RSD offers their aluminum frame bike at a really reasonable price point, starting at around $21.49. However, if you have more in the budget, you can certainly get higher spec builds of the bike, including suspension fork options, and they even have a titanium frame option as well. So the Mayor is a great bike to consider if snow riding is part of your preference, but you lean more towards the dirt trail riding side in the summer. And last but not least is the Norco Bigfoot. The Norco Bigfoot is a bike I've consistently had in my top 10 lists over the years. And with a fresh bike for 2025, they're on this list too. At $2,000, the bike checks all the boxes for fat bike performance. It has an alloy frame with a carbon fork, comes with 27 5-inch wheels with 4.5-inch tires, and a solid set of name brand components to offer reliable performance at a reasonable price. So if the bike appeals to you, it's a great all-around choice and why I have it on my top 10 list for 2025. So now that the top 10 bikes are out of the way, I do want to touch on a couple honorable mentions, including a couple e-fat bikes. And I said I'd circle back to the Bear Graas, which again I do own and do ride often. And really the only reason I didn't put it in the top 10 list was because over the last few years it has gotten drastically more expensive without any real upgrades to the bike or the component list. So while I do think it's a great bike and I love mine, I do feel like the value is taking a turn for the worse. And another factor is the Bear Graas is limited on max tire size. But again, it's designed more as a groomed racing bike. But I have done a custom build on mine. It is now permanently 29 plus with drop and aero bars, and I find it to be a fantastic day ride adventure bike, and it's the bike I select to ride when it's windy. The other bike on this list that certainly deserves an honorable mention is the new Surly Moonlander. A new fat bike from Surly, and certainly one like this Moonlander that throws caution to the wind and thinks outside the box, is definitely worth mentioning here. They really did make something special that is unmatched in maximum capability. However, because I do see it as a niche bike in an already niche segment, and it carries a pretty hefty $4,000 plus price tag, it's not a bike I would recommend for most people on this list. However, for the small segment of people out there that know they need its full range of capability and what it offers, they will love it. So with e-bikes being such a big topic in the cycling industry these days, I figured I needed to mention at least a couple that I thought were relevant for fat biking. There are actually a lot of e-fat tire bikes on the market. However, most of these really aren't designed with snow performance in mind. Some of these are really heavy bikes, weighing 80 or 90 pounds, with fairly small tires for a fat bike, usually in that 4-inch range. And they often have some odd geometry choices, and especially any of the newer bikes, which are getting even more progressive with their geometry. But there are two e-fat bikes on the market, which do a great job cutting the weight of the e-fat bike down to a more manageable level, and this helps keep the performance attributes of the bike intact. But they also offer geometry and aesthetics that are in line with their non-e-bike models corresponding in their lineups. And the first bike I'm going to talk about is actually a bike I have featured on the channel and have a good amount of actual test experience on, and that's the Borealis Keystone. My full review is obviously linked down below, but the Keystone really pleasantly surprised me. As while I'm certainly not an anti-e-bike guy, generally speaking, e-bikes are just not something I have an interest in right now, at least not at this stage of my life. Anyways, the Keystone proved to be incredibly fun. The e-bike performance was really impressive, but most importantly, it actually felt like I was riding a fat bike designed by fat bikers, which is certainly true of the people at Borealis. The other e-bike I'm going to mention is a bike I haven't ridden yet, but it's another bike that seems to carry over a lot of the similar concepts of the Keystone, and that's the Ari Explorer Peak. Much like the Keystone, it appears that the intent of this bike was to add the assistance of an electric bike to the same performance and design attributes, including the aesthetics of their non-e-bike fat bikes. But it's a bike I would love to try out to verify for sure. I do have a little bit of experience with Ari though. Mike from the Last Line of Defense YouTube channel actually let me try out his eMTB, so I got to get a feel for their design aesthetic with the e-bike integrated into a mountain bike and was really impressed with that. So I would expect the results from the fat bike to be the same. So that is this year's top 10 fat bikes for 2025, including a few honorable mentions. If you have any questions or comments, definitely drop those in the comments section down below. If you have any bikes that you feel like should be on the list or that you'd like to give a shout out out to based on your own experience, also drop that down in the comments down below. Lots of fat bike content is coming for 2025, including building that new Surly ice cream truck frame, which will be different than my 2020 model, so stay tuned. Thanks a lot and have a great day.